Hey guys, this is the demo video for how to download and use the Vertex-based user controls toolbox for GameMaker Studio. To get started, let's make sure that we have GameMaker Studio installed. Open and let's create a new project. Blank GML and user controls toolbox demo, I guess. And we'll say let's go. To obtain the project, you'll go to the marketplace, open marketplace. And right now it can be found easiest just by going to the projects option, the link, and then hit latest. And it should be about the first one on there. It's only been uploaded for a little while. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And if you can't find it, you should be good just to search for Vertex-based user controls toolbox, and that should get it for you. We'll download the project. And once it's downloaded, we'll extract the project to a preferred directory of your choice. Once it's extracted, we can go back into GameMaker Studio and we'll click on the Marketplace option again, and now we'll go down to My Library. Now these are all the assets that you've downloaded thus far. And if you don't see it in this list, you can go ahead and hit the Refresh Library option. And we'll click on the project and then hit Import. And we're going to go ahead and import all. And once that's done, we'll go back to our workspace. And as you can see, we've got some new options here. There's quite a bit of scripts that come with this project. We have Vertex scripts, string, Sprite scripts, so forth. But the ones we're mainly interested in are going to be our toolbox options. We have a main controls option. This is like the parent control. This has a lot of inherited values that the child objects use. If you put the controls object in your room, it won't really do anything. Just FYI. And then the main folders that we're interested in are the buttons and the value selectors. Right now, if we go to our room controls overview, which was included in the package, we'll notice that we have some controls that are already instantiated. These were essentially just dragged and dropped in, just as a really quick demo options just to see how these things work. And you can certainly drag and drop these in. And then a scroll bar, when you instantiate a scroll bar for the first time, it's going to be this large square. This is the sprite that it's based on. And if I were to run the project right now, I would get a vertical scroll bar that's square. To change the size, you can do this. Also, when we instantiate controls at runtime using code, we can basically say, I want a scroll bar and I only want it to be, 32 pixels wide or 16 pixels wide, whatnot. But for our purposes here, for demonstration, you can just drag and drop them in. And then we have a spin button, which is basically a scroll bar without the thumb. And the thumb is that little button that you can move back and forth in a scroll bar. And I believe spin buttons only move one small tick a time, and you can change the value that it moves per time. And we'll go over that later. In the meantime, let's make sure that our controls room starts first. So we'll go ahead and switch. And then we will run and see what it looks like. If it will compile for us. Oh, and this is compatible with the Yo-Yo compiler as well. So, as you can see, we've got a series of user controls here. We've got our scroll bars. And there's a blinking option that you can change the blink, you can turn it off. It just lets you know that it's currently has focus. And on this one, we've got some rotated controls. And as you can see, the one that's currently has focus maintains focus even as I move the thumb below the other scroll bar. And there's a distance. If I go too far, it resets back to where it was when it first started. That is to say, where it first started when I select it. So I unclicked, I clicked again. I'm going to move off, move up here, move off. That's where it was when I first started. And that's kind of the industry standard I noticed when I was setting this up. But if I'm wrong, don't quote me on that. Anyway, and we've got a large command button here with an image overlay and a caption. And we've got some radio buttons here. So radio button 1, 2, 3, or 3, 4 rather. Now, these radio buttons are set up on a group, and the group is a string name. And right now I believe the group name is just group 1. And you can have multiple assortments, multiple groups of radio buttons. So like if I had group 2, any changes I made to group 2 would not affect group 1 and so forth. We have toggle buttons, which are basically the same as a checkbox. However, a checkbox may have what's called a triple state. So you can do true, false, and undefined on a checkbox. And if it is undefined by default, the check turns kind of a neutral gray color. And then toggle buttons, one thing, they can be set up on groups as well. We'll go over that later. And command buttons, these are basically on while it's activated and then off. These are really good for really fast true false type things that you might need. And then of course our spin buttons. And again, these move one tick at a time. And then our scroll bar, we've got horizontal, vertical. These are compatible with keyboard keys, so I'm pressing up and down. And then incidentally, left and right, so left, right. And that's just kind of the way, I believe that is the industry standard. So up, down, left, right. And then we have page up, page down. These are the large changes that you can set up in your variable options. And then home and end. So that maxes and mins. So that's just a really quick overview. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and I'm going to set up some getters and setters that come with the package to instantiate a control and manipulate its values. So I'll get to that point in this video. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and created a demo object. Go ahead and call it obj demo setup. And so I have a current selection, a current control as object index, and we're going to go ahead and default that to the scroll bar. And then the current control will just say no one. And on our draw event, depending on the current selection, we'll just draw a different sprite in the lower left-hand corner of the room. And in our step event, we're going to go ahead and get current control as object index. So if we're 0, we're going to be a scroll bar and so forth down to the radio button. And we're going to go ahead and create so I've got a custom setup script here. So controls create control, and you're going to pass in the layer name if applicable. If it's empty, it's going to use the current layer name of the current object calling this function. And then we're going to use the current object that we got from our switch statement. And then we've got our mouse X and mouse Y, which is where we are going to create the control. And then the rest of these are all optional. You can put in a Z depth if you want. X2 would be your width. Y2 would be your height. And if you flip those, it's going to take the greater of the two. So even if you put in your X1 and you did it backwards, it's going to take the greater of the two. We have our rotation. And then we've got some things that we'll go over later. So we've got an array of custom variable names that we can use. And then let's make this wider, variable values. So what you'll do is you'll basically you can create a 2D array and you can pull every other one, but you've got the name of the variable, and these are going to be the same names that you would find here in your variable definitions. So you could say that I want to create an object and I want to set its back color, which is basically the main color of the control, to be like blue or something. So we'll go in here, let's try that actually. So we'll go into our demo setup and to our step event. And let's say, now these are arrays. If you don't instantiate it as an array, I think it just doesn't use it. I don't think it throws an error. So just make sure that you instantiate it as an array. And we're going to pass in, so we're going to make it blue. Now this C underscore capital B LUE, that is some custom colors that I went ahead and included with this asset package. So if we go into scripts, color, there is the extended color names. And the extended color names, these are all of the HTML colors. And they are assorted in BGR colors. So blue, green, red is they're not the new ones that you can do RGB that GameMaker recently introduced. So this is just the old hexadecimal version. And then I've got some Windows colors that I basically grabbed from Windows and matched them. And you can use these, and these include an alpha channel, and the alpha channel for the most part is always FF. There is this one exception, color clear, which is used for some things. For example, the radio button and the checkbox, it's always generating the check mark or the dot, but when it's false, it's using the C_clear color. So just FYI. So we're going to create a control, and we're going to make it blue just by default. Okay, silly me. I just needed to place the demo object actually in the room. So hopefully we'll actually get something now. So now it says we're going to instantiate a scroll bar. And if we were to switch this, so we now get a blue scroll bar. Silly me. I forgot to incorporate a way to actually scroll through these. So let's say that we wanted to create some other objects, so maybe a spin button, and we'll hit the letter I for instantiate. So now we have a blue spin button, and we'll create a command button, several of those. We'll make a toggle button, and we'll make a checkbox, and a series of radio buttons, I guess. And remember, only the one in the group is true. So, with that being said, you can set all sorts of values here in this array of custom variable names upon instantiation. So next, we're going to try to manipulate a control that we currently have in the room. So I'll be right back with that. So now we're going to instantiate a control. We're going to make it a random color, cyan, magenta, or yellow. And then when we press the 1 key, we're going to make it wider. 2 is going to make it taller. 3 is just going to be a general resize. 4 will move the control. 5 will do a plus angle, and 6 will do a minus angle. So we'll try that out. Okay, so we're going to instantiate a scroll bar. Click on it to give it focus, and then we'll hold down the 1 key. And as you can see, we're making it wider. Now, because it's automatic, you see right now it's considered a horizontal scroll bar, but now it's a vertical scroll bar. Make it taller, and then it becomes horizontal when it gets too small. And then 3, we'll just do all sorts of weird stuff with it. 4, we can move it anywhere we want. 5, we can rotate. 6, we can go the other way. Now, when you rotate a control, just FYI, if you try to resize it, it's going to resize it according to that plane. So this is like the X plane. This is the Y plane. So just be careful with that when you rotate these, because it's the matrix that's actually rotating, not the sprite. Next, we'll go ahead and set other values, like we'll generate a command button that makes a sound whenever you click on it. So to do that, let's go ahead and drag and drop a command button into the room. Let's resize it. And we'll click on our variables list. And again, the ones that say CTRL, these are the parent variables that all controls inherit. And we scroll down to the local command button variables. And we've got a couple of sound options here. So we have command button sound on click, command button sound on release. So we'll go ahead and apply a sound. So we'll do ding 1 or ding 2 and then ding 1. I believe maybe I reversed them. I don't remember. One of them was like a lower sound than the other. I think it is the other way around actually. So we'll do ding 2 or ding 1 and ding 2. And then swap sounds, this will just reverse what's here. And so what's going to happen now? Sounds like a doorbell, right? In fact, we'll go and call that doorbell. Exclamation point. And we can do the same thing by instantiating a control at runtime. So we'll say, now this would, if we try to do this with the scroll bar, it won't crash it, but it will give us a debug message. So let's just keep it on the scroll bar down here in the corner. Remember, we're cycling through these. So if I try to instantiate a scroll bar now, it says calling control 22, error in control, set control variables by ID. Now there's control variable by ID and control variables by ID. Variable by ID only sets one variable at a time, so just keep that in mind. Command button sound on click cannot be found in scroll bar, blah, 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 blah. And then it says the same thing on release. So we go in here, we'll go ahead and just move this one aside. And let's get to the command button. So we've instantiated command button number 2, and we have our bell sound. And if we hadn't included these, so we'll comment these out, we shouldn't get any sounds. And sorry if that ding dong sounds a little bit too loud. You might want to turn your volume down a little bit. My bad. So that one works, and then this one, whoops, gotta make sure we're on the command button. So no sound. So next we'll go ahead and apply some texture maps and other options to the various controls. So I went ahead and went online and grabbed a picture of Mount Rainier. So just went in and copied that. And this is a very large image. So if we go into our room, and I went in and put some other controls in here, let's say that we want the command button to have Mount Rainier on it. So we'll say variables, and then we'll scroll down. We've got command button sprite index, and we'll go ahead and select a sprite, and we'll put Mount Rainier in there. And you can select a different image index if you want. And there's an option here, is overlay. This means that the sprite is going to be auto-sized within the buttons. So instead of stretching to fit the entire surface of the button, it's just going to occupy like an aspect ratio correct portion within the button. And down here you can change what that's going to be. So let me widen this here. So we can maintain the aspect ratio. We can enlarge by a certain UV percentage. That just honestly makes it a little bit bigger. It's complicated. I won't really go into it. But and then we have allow auto sizing best to fit, and that's going to try to make it fit best within the button. Allow to squish. Don't use this. This was me. I was being pedantic, basically. If you go into like a WPF form, like a user form, or like a command button, or better yet, like a VBA command button, and you put an image in there and a caption, when the caption gets too wide, when it starts to overtake the bounds of the button, it'll actually start making the texture map or the image smaller. It'll squish it, basically. And this only works horizontally. I didn't incorporate it vertically, but don't use this. Anyway, so let's see what it looks like. So we instantiate the image on the control. Oh, there is one thing I forgot, and this is good that I forgot this, actually. Yeah, you see this right now? Let's see, I think 3 is our full resize. We're getting a whole bunch of texture maps on here now because I forgot to click to make this texture map have its own texture page. So these have to have their own texture page, just FYI. So we'll click that. And now hopefully it will cooperate. That's taking a long time to stop, probably because the image was so big. Okay, now it's going again. And also it had to create its own texture map of a large image. And I think there's like limits to the size that the texture page can be. Yeah, because it's having an issue. Maybe that image is a little bit too big for it. That's probably not the best image to be using. Yeah, I think that image is too big. Let's see. Edit image. Let's just make it a little bit smaller. And we'll just say maybe 1920. Okay. Well, now let's see what we get here. Hopefully this will size the image a little bit better. Yeah, there we go. That's a little bit more reasonable. Yeah, excessively large images may cause a strange problem. But as you can see, the image is sort of trying to stay in its own little best fit window. And you know, you've got your caption always in the middle. And we can change the relation between the caption and the image. First off, let me deactivate all this. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and say okay, we have button sprite overlay horizontal alignment. What that's going to do is it's going to take the sprite or the texture map and it's going to put it in specific parts within the plane that we're putting it on. So if we wanted left top, we're going to have the sprite default to being in the left top of the plane. And this is the relationship between the caption and the sprite itself. So this, if the caption is taller or wider than the sprite, then the sprite will orbit the caption. If the caption is smaller, then the caption will orbit the sprite, basically. So right now we'll say left top, and I believe this puts the caption on the left top. So we should have a sprite that's moved over slightly with the caption to the left. Okay, it's the other way, my bad. Okay, so the sprite is the left top, if that makes sense. So if we switch this to right top, it will be on the other side. Yeah. And then if we're not allowing to squish, you see how the caption moves off the edge? So now if we allow to squish, I think this should cause the sprite to sort of squish on the right. Yeah, see how the sprite is... Again, that's just a weird option, and it does not work vertically. So if we use, like, for example, above, well, let's try like above center or something. So it's not really, it's making the sprite smaller, but it's not squishing it to keep the caption sort of in view. So just FYI. And again, you can play with these. There's a lot of different orientation options and stuff to tickle you pink and suit your fancy. There's an offset option here. So what this does, this allows you to arbitrarily offset the sprite. Now you can check this box here, treat no offset as offset. So even if it's 0, it'll still do it. But we'll go ahead and offset. We'll say we'll offset it by like 256. So it'll be 256 to the right of where it would have been. And so you see the sprite is now here. And that anchor point is arbitrary. So we've anchored it to the top left, right, of the button. And incidentally, when we offset, notice how the texture and the caption are not moving when I click. I don't know if I showed that. Let's put this back to 0. The way that these are set up, it's a skeuomorph, and so it's designed to make it look like the texture is shifting. See that? See how the texture map shifts in the caption? So when we offset, we do not shift, just FYI. And again, we have that anchor point. Now, if I change the anchor point to the center, how about center middle? It's going to react in a way that you might not have expected. So we're offset from the center middle, but as we resize, the center changes, so the sprite is going to move down and around in relation to that center. Okay? So just keep that in mind. And again, it'll rotate along with the matrix as well. Okay, and there's some other interesting things here. We can use shaders. So a shader idle is just the way it is when we're not touching it. It doesn't have focus. It doesn't have optional focus. It's just a button sitting there without anything happening. Let's put a shader on it. So we've got shader blue, brighter cyan, darker green, magenta, red, yellow. These are just shaders that I incorporated. There is another shader for deactivated. It's kind of a gray color, just FYI. You can disable a control. So control enabled false. This should make it gray, I hope. Okay, yeah, perfect. And as you can see, I try to click on it. I can't. I wonder if I could arbitrarily resize it. Okay, so I can't arbitrarily. So I can't really do much of anything. Now, the control set variables functions can override this. So those are arbitrary. So you can arbitrarily set a control's value even if it's not enabled using those functions. So just keep that in mind. So we can re-enable. And then we'll do a shader. Now, optional focus, we'll need a couple controls to demonstrate that. That's a right-click focus. So if you right-click on a control, you will get the optional focus. And you know, maybe that's not the best place to set these. Let's actually set it in the master. So we'll go to the command button itself, and we'll set the variable definition here. And so any command button okay. So you see that we're mousing over, it's turning cyan. Now I'm going to right click on command button 2. See how it turned yellow? And then I click and hold, see how it's like a dark blue as I'm right clicking. And then left click, green. And then I mouse away, it's magenta because it has focus, right? So has focus magenta. And then hover, it's cyan. Left click green, right click blue. And idling, nothing's happening, it's red. So that has optional focus, this has normal focus. And let me just set those defaults back. Your scroll bar and your spin button have a few additional options in terms of shaders. They have shader overrides. Now, the scroll bar and the spin button are basically aggregate controls. So they have multiple other controls that make them. So the scroll bar actually is constructed of a series of command buttons. And so we've got our decrease button, which is a command button. And here we've got shader overrides. So the individual components of the scroll bar can have shaders, or the entire scroll bar can be shaded using this. As soon as there's an override, it will override whatever shader's here. So just FYI. And again, you can use images if you want. You can actually disable whether you want an arrow to render. You can change the type of a render, a type of arrow. So we have V and traffic. Let me show you what traffic arrows look like. They're kind of cool. They basically look like something you'd see at like a traffic stop or something. Arrow type isosceles traffic. And then V is, that's used in a lot of, like right here where it says recent windows. You see that? Oh wait, my image is in the way. You see this right here? This V where my mouse cursor is? It basically looks like one of those. Let me instantiate a scroll bar to show you that. Again, there's so many options here that it's impossible to do it justice just in a short demo video. So they kind of look like traffic arrows, right? And there's other design motifs you can use. If you go into the main control, this will set obviously your default values. But down here where it says design motif, skeuomorphism basically means that it's a two-dimensional object that's colored and shaded to look like it's three-dimensional. And so in the older Windows versions, you had skeuomorphs. They looked like they were actual buttons, and when you pressed them, it looked like they were being pressed in. Well, flat design is more of a common thing that's used nowadays. There's also material design. That's a Google thing. I was going to incorporate that, and if this sells well, I might go back and do material design. But for now, if we switch to flat, as you can see, they look like flat buttons now, right? So we'll instantiate a spin button. Looks flat. See that? Doesn't really look like it's pressing down or anything. Toggle button is a little different. So it's on. It's off. Checkbox. Checkbox, it's not that interesting. It just makes the square that forms around a little bit darker. Radio button likewise. What else? Let's see. We've gone over the shaders, how to put a texture map on the control. Oh, you can stretch to fit. Let me go back to the room. And we will go ahead and stretch to fit. Let me just turn these off for now. So we'll say that we have the Mount Rainier sprite on there. We'll go ahead and change this where it says overlay. So you can either stretch to fit here, and this is going to be different than what you're expecting. If it was flat design, it really would stretch to fit to the outside, but skeuomorphism will only stretch to fit to the top of the button. That's like, I call it the plateau of the button, not the shaded sides that look like it's, like a 3D trapezoid thing. I'm sorry, one thing I forgot to mention, if you're trying to stretch to fit and it's an overlay, make sure that your caption and sprite overlay alignment are set to none. Otherwise, it will override this. So if we want to stretch to fit, we have to set this to none. And then it will stretch to fit. So we've got a nice sprite map or bit texture map that is now stretching to fit the label area. But it's only stretching within the skeuomorphic area. So you've got that boundary on the outside, basically a border. But if we turn this off, sprite overlay being false overrides all of this stuff. Even this doesn't work. And it just applies a texture map to the button surface itself. Now it's still a skeuomorph. I've got a Vertex Adder that basically applies the UVs in such a way that it will also apply the UVs accurately to the skeuomorphic border of the button. Get that thing out of the way. Whoop, wrong button. So, and then incidentally, a flat design should stretch to fit to the entire area and not shift when we click it because it's considered flat. I should get rid of that. Yeah, see, it just turns black. Or, it gets darker. So, anyway. So that was just a rough overview, a rough demo of what this package is capable of. And I just realized that I forgot to go over the toggle buttons. So, toggle button groups, it's very simple. You go into your toggle button variable definitions, and you'd scroll down. And notice, okay, so a lot of these say command button, sound on click, and so forth. That's because the toggle button is a command button. So just FYI on that. And so to do this, you would say toggle button group mode enabled, and you say true. And then your string, you just say like, I don't know, group 1 or something. And remember, it's case sensitive, spaces are not trimmed. that is not trimmed. So, and even an empty string is used. So if it says, okay, toggle button enabled, and there's other toggle buttons that have an empty string, they'll be considered part of the group. So for example, I've got this one, it's true. We'll make this one true as well. And again, in your variable definitions, when you instantiate a control, you can set all this stuff. So you don't have to meticulously, go through this process each time. And then group mode enabled. And we'll see if I'm correct in that or not. I believe it works with empty strings. I don't know. Maybe I made it so it wouldn't. Okay, yeah, you see that? So button 2 is currently true, button 3 is currently true, and 2 becomes false. And then this isn't part of the group, so it's not affected. So a best practice for this would be to actually name the group string. And likewise, the radio buttons don't have group mode. It's just a default. So there's no way to disable groups, but you can simply change the names. I'll change this one to 2, this top one. And when we run this, the top one will have a value, but the bottom 2 can be independent of that value. So that one's true. Oh, that one's true. Oh. So that's just something about those, I guess, list control options. I'm not sure what the actual name is for that kind of a control, like an array control option or something. What else? I said something about spin button. Oh, yeah. So spin buttons, likewise, we can change arrow types. We can basically do everything that we can do with a scroll bar with a spin button. But again, you don't have the thumb that you can, manipulate. And your large changes and small changes, you only get small changes on a spin button. There it is. So small change, if you wanted it to move in increments of 10, you'd say, okay, so every time I click the button or press one of the keys, it's going to be plus 10, plus 10, plus 10 until it hits 100, which is the maximum. And then you've got your minimum. And on the scroll bars really quick, this is very similar to a VBA scroll bar. So even if you use like a negative number, it will still accurately scroll. Let's see here. There we go. So we've got, track and thumb only. That disables the buttons. So it's just the scroll bar, track, and the thumb. So you don't have the increase and decrease buttons. You can also force those buttons. If, let's say you wanted to keep the buttons, you can force them to be square. Auto to square. That'll make like your decrease button square. So large change, you could change that to something else. Let's say like, 100,000. Let's say your minimum was negative 100,000. Large change is 1,000. Small change is just 1, whatever. And you could reverse these too. There's a way to display a control's information. Let me disable these so it's easier to tell what's going on. Let me move this so we can see it. This actually has a lot of stuff that it displays if you display all the information. So up here where it says where is it? Control display. Okay, yes. Control display data. The position. If it says false, it won't do anything. If it says true, it's going to display it in the upper left corner of the room or of the GUI, so of this current window. And then these are just options where you can put it in different orientations around the control. So you've got none is going to be in the center of the control. Left top, this actually is in the left top other than the images. So right now we've got left top, and it's going to display all the pertinent information about the control. So we've got, The object name, scroll bar index is 7. That's the object index in the tree. The ID itself, the name is scroll bar 1. The control instance number is an instance number of that control, and that number 1 gets put at the end of the control name. It's kind of complicated. You don't need to worry so much about the control names. I've gone to great lengths to make sure that the control names are always unique. If you encounter an error with that, by all means, please let me know, and we'll try to track it down and fix it, make sure that that does not happen. Whether or not it's a background. Backgrounds are not used yet. They would be things like frames, if you're familiar with making a user form. Frames, like tab indexes, where you can select different tabs and get different controls to show up, stuff like that. Your tab index, I forgot to mention, if we had multiple controls, so I'll instantiate a scroll bar here, and right now, if I hit the tab key, see how it goes between them? See how focus changes? So it says true, false, true, false. So your tab indexes are unique for each control, and you could tab through the controls. Hitting shift goes backwards, so shift tab will tab backwards. So it's similar to what you would expect from Windows. And so right now, value, this is the increase, okay? So the increased value is actually decreasing, right? Because our max value is negative. And then our min value is positive, so it goes up. And then we've just basically got whether or not the control is enabled, appearance, opacity, draw event used. We can draw this in the normal draw event. And this is useful, like if for some reason you had to draw these in like a viewport for whatever reason. Let's say and let's just make it really small. So we've got a 256 by 256 viewport. And we'll draw this in the normal draw event. So right now we're drawing GUI end. We'll draw normal end. And we should get kind of a weird looking scroll bar that's kind of too big looking. Now this information is always drawn in the GUI event, so just FYI. The point is we can resize it within this, we can move it within this, and see your information is moving according to the GUI. So this is actually the position that it's in the GUI. This is the position it is in the actual viewport. And again, and the reason it's getting skewed like that is because it's a square viewport on a rectangular surface. So as we rotate, the skewing gets really extreme. But because the matrix, the mouse cursor is tracing a ray from the viewport down onto the matrix, and it's an orthographic projection. All of these controls are an orthographic projection. We accurately click, so that's kind of neat. And then if we wanted to instantiate a control, I'm not sure what control it's currently on. We'll instantiate a control, but it's in the GUI. So controls default to the GUI event. And you see, these are always going to look accurate because it's being drawn in relation to the window, not the viewport. What else? I think that basically covers it. If you have any questions, just leave comments. Open to discussion, suggestions for improvement. Again, if this sells well, it's free at the moment. If it sells well, I'll definitely incorporate more, but it's going to have to sell really well, like $20,000, $30,000 before I would really have the motivation to to get back and do a whole ton more with it. But it will be free probably for the next while, maybe a couple weeks. I just want people to try it out and see if they like it, maybe make review videos of their own. Anyway, I think that's everything. And I'd love to hear back from you guys, and have a great day, and happy gaming.